No, I'm not even fooling.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at the programs today, Allison,
Yeah.
and what they had was obviously a lot of Ukraine, and then a little bit of talk, to give credit to I think it was to CBS, a little bit of the Title 42. In other
Okay.
words, 20,000 people a day flowing over the borders very shortly in May, anyway, which is the end of Title 42, when you can use COVID to keep them away,
Right.
illegal immigrants, and then, which is going to be a problem, which they essentially had Obama's former Homeland guy saying somebody needs to, the CDC should probably extend this a little while, because March, April, May are the high season for entries. But this administration does everything wrong, so they're not going to. So they're going to have right in the middle of it a surge over the border.
Now, to their credit, they've been taking a ton of criticism from the left about even keeping Title 42 at all. I mean, it's been maybe not the biggest thing going on, because they've been screwing up so much other stuff that's been more disastrous and obvious. But people on the left have been very upset that they've still been using this Trump policy to keep some immigrants out, at least, and they have kept it. So for all the disaster at the border stuff that they've been doing, that is one thing that they've quietly been doing that I believe has been mitigating it a little bit. But it's like you're saying, it's about to get way worse.
Right. So it allows people at the border to expel migrants and asylum seekers on public health guidelines, which is good. And the administration also is not. There aren't guarantees that people who we admit, once it happens, are going to have to show their COVID negative. I would assume that they're not going to have to show that, because the border facility is going to be overrun anyway. So that's the hit they took on that. But and there's inflation. They talked about that. They talked about Lawrence Summers was on, who he's the guy who called this inflation really last a year and a half or whatever ago.
We were mad at him about it at
Right.
the time.
Well, he wanted to take my stimmy from me, I think.
Well, right.
But and now he's saying there's going to be a recession coming up, which kind of makes sense. Which is how you really I think how you get out of inflation eventually. Okay, so
Did they talk about Shanghai at all?
no, they didn't.
Because I feel like that's the biggest story in the world right now.
Right. So those of you who are just hanging your Ukraine flags, don't get too comfortable. It is about time. It is about time. This stuff is incredible. What is that movie we seen last night?
Oh, Ready Player One.
Yeah. What's happening in Shanghai looks like that. It's crazy. Right. They're using drones and things to do all sorts of stuff. It's nuts. So I probably have that. You send all that stuff to me?
I think so. Did you have the drone? I don't know. But I mean, it's in...
It's nuts, though. All this stuff going on in Shanghai. And so here's a little bit of it here. These are people screaming.
好了，终于来外头，所有人都在叫。
These are all high rises.
要命了。
People screaming out the windows. These people are starving to
就
death.
刚刚。
Yeah.
Because there's a COVID outbreak there.
Right. So because I don't think this has been getting a lot of attention on the news here, people might not even realize that this is happening. But the entire city of Shanghai and some of the surrounding areas as well this is a city of 25 million people. So it's what's Manhattan, like 8? It's like 3 Manhattans, right? It's like, this is a huge city, and it's fully locked down. Not locked down like we did here. Locked down like you cannot go to the grocery store. You cannot get your prescription medication. Right. They're relying on delivery services right now, and the government organizing food deliveries, which maybe you could do on a really small scale if you lived in like a village. You could have somebody delivering food to everybody. But in a city of 25 million people, you just can't have centralized food planning.
There aren't even 25 million Massachusetts.
No, there's like 6 million in Massachusetts, I think.
Here's some more. You can see the people in the videos on the balconies. It's just totally creepy.
So I've been following on this. Who's a good follow on this that I hate to recommend anybody follow because I despise
here's
him?
a drone. Hold on, here's a drone.
You have the drone?
Yeah. As seen in Weibos, Shanghai residents go to their balconies to sing and protest lack of supplies. A drone appears. Please comply with COVID restrictions. Control your soul's desire for freedom. Do not open the window or sing. Man, what a state. A state that can track these people, lock them in these buildings, have drones lecture them, but can't feed them. Ooh.
Yeah, it's really bad. And so I've been following Derek Clegg on this, who I hate because he's actually like pro very strict COVID containment policies and like masking kids in school, even though he was sending his kids to maskless schools in Europe. Like, he's terrible. He's like really bad. But he is originally from Shanghai, so he speaks it's like a very particular dialect that they speak there. It's not Mandarin, it's Shanghainese. And then so he's able to like translate a lot of these tweets and stuff and say if they seem like legit. And the fact that he is now saying that this is like not a sustainable thing that's happening there is a little scary. So and he has relatives there. So he's saying like in the wealthier areas, people are able to get these deliveries because they're basically like sitting at the apps and everybody in the family is like refreshing the app and all hitting buy on the delivery anytime like one shows up as available. And doing that, like if you're a wealthier family and you have the time to sit around pressing refresh on the delivery app, then you can manage to get something once every few days, which is like enough to keep your family going. But there are a lot of poorer people and older people and stuff who are just not able to get food.
Right.
So there are starting to be some riots and looting. The government is holding people in isolation facilities. Now, bear in mind, they're saying they've had, I want to say 130,000 cases or something, but they're reporting they've had no deaths in all of Shanghai from any COVID. Nobody's died.
Right.
According to them. But they're putting people in isolation facilities, like taking kids from parents, but now they're out of room in the isolation facilities. So now they're sealing people into their buildings.
Right.
Which seems like, among other things, right. It seems, among other things, like a fire hazard, but also people can't get out and get food. So, people are rationing their food. The U.S. consulate, Reuters is reporting, is begging for food because there's Marines trapped there who are down to just MREs. They have nothing else to eat but MREs. And it's unclear. Like, this lockdown is indefinite. They're saying they're going to continue to lock down. It's unclear, like, what the long-term plan is for this because, first of all, their population is not very highly vaccinated. And their vaccine was terrible to start with. Now, with Omicron, it's, like, even worse than ours is with Omicron. It's terrible. And I can't. So they're still trying to control it this way instead of saying, like, get vaccinated and have a nice time, like it's yours to figure out if you want a mask or not. This is their plan now, is we're going to seal people into buildings because we're out of room in the isolation facility. Like, I don't see, this is not something you can do to control a virus. And it's going to be interesting to see if this truly it's obviously too soon to claim this because this is a big claim, but I think if the Chinese government doesn't figure something out here, a different plan, that they're going to be in real trouble in terms of like control over people. So I was reading these Derek Clegg things, and I don't know. I don't know enough about Chinese culture and society to know if this is true, but he was talking about how there was the Great Chinese Famine under communism, and the estimates of how many people died in that is like anywhere from 15 to 55 million people. And he says that because of that, because China has this like relatively recent history, like there's people that are alive now who remember people around them dying in famines, right? And that this is like a huge social fear for people in China, in Chinese culture. He says, Chinese society's deepest fight is against the humiliation of poverty and hunger. The modern core social contract of the CCP is to provide food and prevent mass hunger. If they fail to deliver food to their citizens, that is actually the greatest social failure in Chinese eyes. Every Chinese-born person knows this. Food is the main way to show both love and hospitality, even trying to show off there's too much food. Many parents and grandparents who survived the Great Famine know that that is the hard line society can never cross again. So, I mean, I think that as a government, it's a tough situation to put yourself in, to lock 25 million people into apartment buildings and not let them eat food. And if that's true, that like culturally in Chinese society, that's considered the greatest social failure of the government to let their citizens starve. I mean, I think it could be earth-shattering in Chinese society, what's happening there right now. Because
what does that look like, earth-shattering?
I mean, I think it could result in like a change of their government. Something that hasn't happened now in what, a century? Not quite, but you know, like half a century anyway. So what's like the 40s?
Yeah,
I
guess so. But I mean, I understand. But if they're not afraid to machine gun their own citizens, then what's going to happen? Well, then again, if you can't feed the soldiers either, then that's how it could happen.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, and I think
you know what's funny? You know, we had did we have Michael Yon on this show? We did, right?
Yes. Twice.
Famine and hunger, man. This is 2022 style.
Yeah, but that's you know, if people aren't eating because there's no food anywhere, that's like one thing too. But if people aren't eating because you've trapped them inside their building and you aren't letting them go out and there is food at the store, then that's like even worse to me.
Yeah, I mean, but who knows? Who knows how big? I mean, obviously this is terrible, but we don't know how many COVID deaths there have been. They're
of course,
lying.
not at all.
They're lying constantly. They're always lying. I'm sorry about my chest cold. This is my new COVID or whatever it is. I'm sorry I'm snorting into the thing.
I mean, yeah, it is incredible to me, though, because Eric Ding still doesn't seem able to reevaluate zero COVID as the policy. He's still writing stuff. He says there's like new Omicron subvariants. And he goes, as far as Shanghai is concerned, hashtag COVID is not over anytime soon as they've placed all 26 million residents under lockdown. What did he say here? But it's like incredible to me. The government's approach to combating this outbreak and crisis still appears unstable on what they might appear to do next. A COVID lockdown approach has always been branded a temporary measure. However, lockdown's not equal to zero COVID. It's incredible to me that you can still think there's like something to weigh here, that like, well, zero COVID is good, but they're starting to run into some challenges. Like, I don't know how you can still see it that way at this point. Like, this is a failure. You can't do this. This is not how you contain an illness, especially an illness that you have vaccines for and that you've had time now to build up PPE and whatever else.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to me because people in this country, including people like Ding, held this up as like some sort of success, China's COVID policy. See, they just locked down really hard at the beginning, and that was such a success.
Well, people, a lot of people love the social credit score app, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's nuts. All right, so let me get back to the shows. So something that did jump out at me was, and this is my favorite thing of the day, was Chuck Todd, in the middle of Meet the Press, did this promo for a little Meet the Press special they're doing. And you tell me, Alice, what could possibly have been the origin behind this little promo that they're doing?
Before we go to break, we also want to tell you about our latest episode of our single-topic magazine show, Meet the Press Reports. This week, NBC News correspondent Morgan Radford helped us take a look at the explosion of online misinformation plaguing America's Latino community.
Do you think there is misinformation within the Latino community?
Absolutely.
Are you kidding me?
110%.
Oh my God. I mean, it's everywhere. Not only misinformation, but disinformation, targeted specifically Spanish language and the Latino community.
It's a belief backed up by national research, with more than a third of Hispanic Americans saying they see misinformation often online.
By a show of hands, how many of you have personally received misinformation? All of you.
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
Our tias, our primos, our abuelas.
De todos.
Everybody.
In other words, the non-spoiled generations.
Yeah.
So what is the need to send the misinformation police to the Hispanic Latino, as she says, community?
Because is polling showing they're moving more right?
That is correct. That is right. Latinos are moving. They're on notice now. They've been put on notice. They have one chance. They are voting for conservatives more and more because Latinos
Latinos, like most other people, don't like going to the grocery store and having everything be twice as expensive as it was last year. And Latinos, like everybody else, don't like, when the U.S. government abandons American citizens in a collapsing government that they created. And Latinos, like everybody else, don't like weird, crazy gender ideology being pushed on their kids at school.
Right, and also, Latinos, as she says, are Americans.
Yeah.
And they've had the American experience. They're invested in the country. They've gotten dividends in the country. They feel it's their country, and it is their country. And so this is fantastic. This is so perfectly progressive. Get the Latino, Latinx, activist class, which is a thin number, small number, and then get all the white wine moms together and say, guys, we need to do something about this messaging. So listen. There's so much gold in this special. This is how it starts off with Chuck Todd.
Misinformation comes in all languages, but there's growing evidence that the misinformation crisis is most acute for one group in particular in this country, Latinos.
There's growing evidence. Now you're going to hear where the growing evidence is from.
The most recent Pew Research study found that Hispanic adults are more likely to use YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and WhatsApp.
And how are those idiots supposed to know how to use that correctly? They're not like the smart whites who would know how to use those things. How patronizing is this? They're using WhatsApp now. That's not guarded. We don't filter on WhatsApp. That's not guarded.
The Facebook-owned private messaging service, they use it more than white and black Americans. In fact, nearly half of Latinos are on WhatsApp, compared to just a quarter of the general population.
Oh, my
And not
goodness.
only are Latinos more likely to have social media accounts, they're also spending more time on the platform than anyone else. And that brings us to the real problem. It lies in the content they're reading.
Do you feel lectured yet if you're Latino? That's the problem. Well, it's not good, first of all, that you're diversified all over these apps that aren't being governed, but we know where you're going and what you're looking at now. Things like fake news, like
I have a question, too.
Hunter Biden's laptop.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know now that people have social media so they can post every random thought that comes into their head. So, like, there's a lot more visibility into what everybody thinks. But don't you think it's just always been true that basically everybody has believed a bunch of stuff that other people probably think is crazy at any given time in history?
Of course.
Like, a bunch of people believe all kinds of things that aren't true all the time.
Yes, of course they do.
The fact is, you're more likely to encounter misinformation online if you're Latino and speak Spanish than if you're white and speak English. And as Morgan Radford reports, while social media platforms like Facebook are expanding Spanish language fact-checking, the impact on the Latino community is already evident.
Can you imagine that? Spanish, what does fact-checking mean for them?
Censoring?
Exactly. And the idea that we see in the trends that there's a problem. So now we're going to meet Susie Calderon. So Susie Calderon is a problem because she is an immigrant from Cuba, and she's going online and reading things and believing things. And by the way, when they're talking about misinformation, disinformation on Facebook, what sort of things do you think they're talking about?
Trump won the election. Vaccines are bad. things like that.
Things like that. That's correct.
They're not like, it's funny too because there's so much stupid stuff on social media, but they're not going out there and fact checking like people who share horoscopes online or whatever, which is also stupid and untrue, like factually not accurate. But
right, that exactly. That's right. To talk about fabricated charges against Brett Kavanaugh, that is not misinformation or disinformation.
We actually know somebody, I know we've said this on the show before, but maybe not in a while, but we know someone who brags on Facebook about being a Facebook fact checker, who's like the wokest person I've known in my entire life. And like including in the things that she talked about fact checking was about like trans people and stuff, and saying that trans women aren't women. She like fact checked that off of Facebook and other stuff.
Of course. Here's Susie Calderon. She's the problem.
Susie Calderon doesn't trust the mainstream media.
I don't believe in the vaccines.
You do not believe in the vaccines?
No.
How dare you? You're not believing in the vaccines. You have to believe in the vaccines. How dare you? I'm somebody who's been vaccinated 3 times.
Yes.
And my faith in the vaccines has been largely shaken. It's like, I understand.
Was it the getting COVID part?
Right. I keep getting COVID, and I keep getting sick from vaccines. The most disruption I've had in my life the last 2 years is post-vaccine.
What do you believe they will do to you?
I think the vaccine has a lot of chemics, and they can damage your body in the long run.
And for
how dare she thinks that the vaccine have a lot of chemicals that could damage your body? How dare she think that? You're not allowed to think that. It has no chemicals, and those no chemicals can't damage your body. That's the truth.
Where she's sitting, things are getting worse.
It's like they're taking away our rights. You can talk.
Wait a second. Taking away your rights with Jim Crow, Jim Eagle voting laws? I'm told that is happening. Isn't that happening? But taking away your rights by making you wear a mask, etc., that's not happening?
Forcing you to get a vaccine that you don't want to get?
So some taking away your rights is not disinformation. Some taking away your rights is disinformation. So if it's anything to do with the government overreaching on you, that's disinformation.
Normally, you have a mask in your face, people see half of your face.
What are some of the...
Wait.
That's... How dare she say
that? Is that disinformation?
Yes, that is disinformation.
Saying that a mask covers half your face?
Yes, it doesn't.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't cover your face.
The things you think that the mainstream media is getting wrong?
Well, disinformation. They want us to not to talk. They don't want us to say the truth.
They were just cheerleading fact checkers and censors a second ago.
Yeah. We want to censor you, and she's like, they're censoring us, and they're like, that's disinformation.
She said, what's the mainstream media getting wrong? This woman just said, well, it's Susie Calderon said misinformation. And they're saying, no, but this whole thing's about misinformation.
Also, can I just say that I think it's a little bit, dare I say, racist for them to interview her in English and try and make her look dumb, where she's like saying words wrong, like chemicals, and like making her trying to sound like an idiot, trying to make her sound like an idiot when she's probably much more articulate in Spanish. And if they interviewed her in Spanish and put a translation on it, she probably would come across much better, but they're not doing it because I think that was a deliberate choice to make her look stupid.
Right. She's the dummy who came from Cuba under Castro, who's seen more life than this dumb cupcake reporter and Susie Calderon's kids have ever seen, who are complaining about her. Mom's got bad information.
Susie came from Cuba in the 1980s. Her daughter, Amore Rodriguez, worries that the government propaganda her mom experienced in Cuba is coloring her perception of what factual information looks like here.
Yeah, Mom, they don't do that anymore here.
Yeah.
Propagandists, leftist, Marxist propagandists would never do that here, Mom. So here's her daughter who knows so much. You know, she went to college probably where she learned so much more about the world than her mother who came from Cuba.
It concerns me that
truth doesn't exist anymore.
Which is part of the reason she started this group
Materials, sign-up lists, graphics.
of like-minded Cuban Americans concerned about the information their families are getting here at home.
What kind of Cuban Americans?
I don't know. What did it say?
Let me go back here.
Okay.
Let me just
It concerns me that truth doesn't exist anymore.
Which is part of the reason she started this group
Materials, sign-up lists, graphics.
of like-minded Cuban Americans.
Like-minded.
That's exactly right. Like-minded Cuban Americans.
The good kind.
Exactly. If you have any problem with any voting machine at all from 2020, you're not welcome in the group. You are not like-minded. If you have problems with the voting machines in 2016 and you think the Russians tampered and took the election, you are like-minded and you are allowed.
Concerned about the information their families are getting here at home.
Do you think there is misinformation within the Latino community?
What a loaded thing to ask. Is there misinformation or is everything factual?
Does
in the Latino?
everybody believe all the exact same things as you?
Right.
No? Then we have a problem.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Are you kidding me?
110%.
Oh my God.
So wait, she's interviewing the anti-disinformation like-minded Cuban Americans group and is asked them if they think there's disinformation.
Yes.
And surprise, they do.
They found some.
Oh, God.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They're going to tell you there's disinformation. It never before.
We started a group
until-
to combat this thing. So do you think there is any of that thing? Yes. Why do you ask?
As a matter of fact, our group's name is that thing. As a matter of fact. And it's remarkable. Never before, nowhere ever do people have different sets of beliefs whatsoever. You know, it's just this group. You know, unfortunately, guys, you're beset upon, it's Latinos are beset upon here by disinformation and misinformation. That's right. They're using your poor old parents who are believing this stuff, who have
Not like their parents literally saw it unfold in their lifetimes, in their lives.
Well, that's why they said that they think that she thinks that Susie Calderon is still traumatized, and that's why she can't get over it. She can't shake it because Castro. So at no point are we checking our own beliefs and saying, does mom have a point in anything at all? Does maybe she know something? No. It's let's diagnose mom's mental deficiencies.
I mean, it's everywhere. Not only misinformation, but disinformation. Targeted.
This is a new, clever thing to know that there's two different things, misinformation but disinformation. Some of this stuff is weaponized on purpose.
Specifically, Spanish language and the Latino community.
It's a belief.
I assume that's any ad a Republican runs in Spanish.
Absolutely.
Disinformation.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Backed up by national research, with more than a third of Hispanic Americans saying they see misinformation often online.
That's an odd thing. It's a belief. It's backed up by national research saying that they see misinformation online.
And did she say a third?
Well,
that's not even that many people.
But anyway,
2/3 of them haven't even seen any disinformation.
But if you're a garden variety Hispanic Trump voter, well, then you're one of those people who's seeing disinformation all over the place. When Hillary Clinton when Adam Schiff is saying that there was Russian collusion, etc.
Of course.
And he's seeing it on MSNBC.
According to one analysis by activist group Avaz.
By who?
Activist group Avaz.
According to one analysis by activist group Avaz.
What's the activist group Avaz?
I'm glad you asked that question, Alice. Activist Group Avaz is a U.S.-based nonprofit organization launched in 2007 that promotes global activism in issues such as climate change, human rights, animal rights, corruption, poverty, and conflict. Avaz has this great thing right here. Said, Trump has been working for Putin's corrupt inner circle for almost 20 years. And it's that corrupt circle that promises to make him rich for the next 20. He's refused in violations of all ethics to divest from his personal businesses.
Is that factual information? Fact
This
check
is
on
Avaz.
aisle 3.
Right. Well, no, they're
Trump has been
activist
working for
information.
Putin's inner circle for
Yes.
20 years?
Yes, this is Avaz. Yes, this is Avaz. This is not misinformation because Avaz says it, and that's right. So MSNBC is trafficking in Avaz, who's trafficking in this disinformation.
That's
But
as
they're
wacky
also-
as any conspiracy theory
Of
on the
course.
right.
Trump may, it says, and this is Avaz advisory, Trump may be a Russian intelligence asset. he may have colluded with Putin to sabotage the U.S. election. But what is clear is that he is a corrupt Russian money launderer and in the pocket of a KGB dictator. The whole world needs to know this. Share this page. That's Avaz. That's the source used for this very down-the-line neutral expose on disinformation.
I'm so glad we have their very thoughtful research on disinformation.
Nearly 70% of misinformation in Spanish went unlabeled by Facebook, compared to less than 30%.
Can you imagine that? We didn't blot out some of the other side's opinions on Facebook. We didn't blot it out. They're still able to see that.
30% of misinformation.
This is, by the way, this is a journalist narrating this, telling people that less information is better.
Mm-hmm.
We need much less information out there. You need to be, the public needs to see less.
Yeah.
Because we've decided
and if you say
that some of it, according to Avaz, is unacceptable.
And then if you say that they're trying to censor information, then that's also disinformation.
Right.
In English.
By a show of hands, how many of you have personally received misinformation? All of you.
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
Our tias, our primos, our abuelas.
De todos.
Everybody.
Besides COVID, what else are you seeing? What other types of...
In other words, our relatives, our parents who have lived life, the ones who put us through college so we could learn to be young Marxists, our parents, our problematic parents who have lived full lives, who've lived where there wasn't freedom, and are noticing things happening right now that remind them of the old country.
Misinformation is out there.
I've seen misinformation on the election. Democrats stole the election.
Yep, there you go. Shocked. The 2016 election? Nope.
Not that one.
That was no.
This reminds me of, too, because people, particularly people on the left, are getting so used to being able to like report misinformation online and stuff, and like a lot of these social media companies will do that for you. They'll take stuff down and censor stuff and change things. You know, they're not going to stop at online. They're going to try and do it for other things too. So, for example, there was recently this did you see anything about this postcard that went out in the Boston area? I think it was postmarked from like New Hampshire or something, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, maybe. But basically, it was like this postcard of conspiracy theory stuff, like, I mean, wacky things. And it's just somebody paid to send it out, to like mass mail it to a bunch of people in the Boston area. And like I saw in the Melrose Facebook group, a bunch of people were complaining about it. Like, how can they allow this stuff to go out? This is crazy. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, somebody just paid to mail it. They're allowed to mail you stuff. Like, put it in the recycle bin if you don't like what it says on it. But like, they're upset about it. And I remember also even, you know, that sort of newspaper, the Epoch Times, that's run by those Chinese anti-communist groups. They did a mass mailing towards the beginning of COVID, like blaming the Chinese government for covering it up and stuff, and saying they were lying and all these things in the lab leak theory. And a bunch of people complained, how is this like crazy conspiracy theory nonsense? Who puts out this racist garbage? Like, first of all, it's put out by Chinese people, so it can't be that racist. But yeah, people are allowed to mail things to you that you don't like. And you just need to put it in the trash and move on with your day. Just the same as if you see something on social media that you don't agree with, you need to scroll on by and go about your day. Or you can comment on it and be mad and start a fight.
Right.
But like,
but this is the point. You know what they want done. Susie Calderon's daughter will tell you.
When your family shares this type of misinformation with you, what do you say?
I personally hit back immediately. I review it. I make sure I fact check myself.
We're literally living in two different realities.
That's right. We're literally living in two different realities, and I want to erase my mother's reality. She has to live in my reality. Because I know so much more, because I'm enlightened. Because I have a framed degree in the other room and a Range Rover and live in a nice spruced up Victorian house. I have the Ukraine flags outside of my house. My reality is better and more sophisticated. So Abuela has to change. What does Abuela know? I'm special. We're the generation who's enlightened.
It's a phenomenon that's having real-world effects. In Florida,
Real world effects.
40% of Cuban Americans say they don't believe President Joe Biden was legitimately elected. And given that Latinos spend more time on social media than their non-Hispanic white counterparts, it's a problem that's not going away.
You're not allowed to believe that an election wasn't on the up and up. You're not allowed to believe that.
Right.
It's a problem.
Right. But it's a free country. You're allowed to believe stuff that's crazy in this country, right? So here's the postcard, right? This is what got sent
Unlike
out.
Cuba, Alice, in this country, you're not allowed to believe something that diverges from what the state tells you, right? Or is that just like Cuba?
That is just like Cuba.
Right.
Yeah, no. And I prefer to live in a country where
before,
you're allowed
before
to
you go away from the postcard, let me just finish this out.
Yeah.
Now this is why this thing was so good. I only got done with cutting the half of this thing. But this is so good. This is so good. Somebody, Alice, sounds an alarm. You're about to hear who.
In Texas, Democratic strategists are sounding the alarm about a wave of misinformation aimed at Latinos heading into 2022.
Wait, who's sounding an alarm about a wave of misinformation? Who should carefully be considered before becoming the primary source in this news piece?
Democratic strategists.
They're sounding the alarm.
Oh, God.
Wow.
Vote red.
Information Tony Torres receives firsthand.
Can you show me where you get your information on?
Yeah, okay.
This is Telegram, Alex Jones, Proud Boys.
These are just different news sources.
Torres is a Latino voter in the Rio Grande Valley who wears a shirt to show he opposes President Biden.
What do you think that shirt says?
Let's go, Brandon.
Absolutely.
Which saw one of the biggest rightward shifts in the country from 2016 to 2020.
So that's just a bad edit, not on my part. That was in there like that. That's just a little part of this interview, which really should be...
His shirt shifted to the right?
No, should be the lead. Because they're talking about voters shifting from Democrat to a Republican. Yeah. And really, that's the lead in this story.
Right.
Latino voters are voting to Democrat to voting.
And instead of trying to find out why and see if there's any way Democrats should adjust what we're doing, we're just going to complain that they're allowed to see things on Facebook.
But MSNBC is on the job.
Reportedly, while U.S. investigators were examining his potential role in this scheme by the Russian government to mess up our election. That's in the dossier. That seems to have happened in real life. At least the checkable parts of it have.
That was Rachel Maddow, whose news and analysis show was happy to, MSNBC, was happy to live off the dossier and Trump's tax returns for 4 years. Here's another recent guest on MSNBC.
Trump was installed as the president of the United States in order to weaken the alliances that were preventing Putin from achieving his goals, alliances like NATO, our relationship with our European partners, our relationship with Ukraine.
Anybody at all, when she said Trump was installed, anybody at all label that as misinformation or disinformation? Unverified? Fact check? Was a little dandy Daniel Dale grabbed over and say, Daniel, just for the hell of it, just humor us. Can you look into this? No, nothing whatsoever. And all of these people, it is such projection by all of them. All of these people were in this complete horse bleep attempt to flood. It's all projection. They are the disinformationers. And so they do disinformation segments about, quote, disinformation, which are all disinformation.
Sir, Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
The Russians offered help. The campaign accepted help. The Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help.
Anybody interject at any point there? Jake Tapper, at any point you want to interject and say, wait a second, can you qualify that? Because it should be without evidence or misinformation or maybe disinformation.
And that is pretty damning.
The top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee is warning today that there is already evidence that the Trump campaign colluded.
Adam Schiff, the top Democrat, saying there is significant evidence of collusion.
Adam Schiff saying there is, quote, significant evidence of collusion. According to Congressman Adam Schiff, who attended the hearing today, President Trump and Trump Jr. had a conversation.
This is something that Adam Schiff, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, brought up today.
We heard from Adam Schiff.
According to Schiff, well,
here's Adam Schiff.
Nobody, it never gets a without proof. Nope. Go, let it go. Go right through. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. And these people are it's just simple poison. And that's what they are. And that's what the MSNBC is and NBC is and all these other people doing the important work on disinformation and misinformation. Go right ahead. Take it where you were.
So yeah, I mean, this is the new standard on the American left is I shouldn't have to hear or see anything that I disagree with. Somebody needs to do something about the fact that people are saying stuff that I don't think is true, which is never how this country has worked. People are allowed to say and write and send out and talk about whatever they want, even if you think it's absolutely nuts, right? And you're allowed to say stuff that I think is absolutely nuts. You're allowed to say that some girls are born with penises and that's just fine. Like, you're allowed to think that, and I'm allowed to think things I think, and we don't have to agree on them, and we're both allowed to say them and do them, right? So here's this like postcard that went out. It was postmarked from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It says the true story of QAnon, and it has pictures of a bunch of celebrities and a QR code to scan. So there's like Romney and Dave Chappelle and Johnny Depp and Jennifer Lawrence, Elon Musk, Mark Milley. It's like a mixed bag of people as far as I can tell. I was the child victim of the cabal spoken of in QAnon. They invented the whole saga of QAnon and planned all the news and entertainment events 20 years ago. They planned 9/11, the 7/7 bombing, the Ukraine war, the COVID-19, and they told me that Luvox cures COVID-19. The minutia of every battle and every action by Zelensky and Putin were planned. They put a mind-reading device in me and tortured me and spied on me my whole life. On Good Friday, this world will end, possibly by nukes, or my world will end. Please read the truth at the below QR code. I will be hiding in Kansas. Please share this and email me.
Hit the QR code. Who is it?
I don't have the whole. It doesn't show the whole thing on this picture.
Oh,
on this picture of it that I have in front of me. But anyway, and there's an email address to email him too if you want to know. I'm sure they're gonna hunt this guy down and make him a news story because people were very distressed.
What's his name?
I don't know if it says there isn't a name on it.
On the email, no?
You can Google it. Maybe somebody somewhere has already started to figure it out on the email. He said he invited recipients to scan the QR code or send emails so I know people are getting my postcards. Postal Service spokesperson Steve Doherty, who works out of Dorchester, said he was among the many who received the mailing. He explained that the Postal Service has limited ability to block messages sent through the mail. Which means that they've been getting complaints about this, obviously. There are certain items that are considered non-mailable, including messaging that would incite someone to commit arson, murder, or assassination. Short of that, we generally focus on the address and postage and not the content. So this was very widely distributed. The NBC 10 story also says New Hampshire political operative Arnie Arneson got the postcard at her home in Concord and worries about all the people who may have clicked on the link. What they did was they got you to do something you normally wouldn't do, which is you connected to them, she said. And for those who might say it's just a crazy person in their basement, Arneson says somebody has a lot of money to be so crazy. Some question if it's appropriate for the U.S. Postal Service to distribute the cards. But spokesperson Steve Doherty, who got the cards, says the delivery does not violate the law. While certainly controversial, there doesn't appear to be anything in the mailing that would make it illegal to send through the mail, he said. Whether you find the mailing interesting, frightening, or funny, you should think twice before clicking on any QR codes from unknown sources. I did actually see in some of the community groups, like people were complaining, like, what if my kids had seen it? How are they allowed to send this through the mail? I mean, sorry, people are allowed to send crazy stuff through the mail. And I honestly, part of me wonders if...
I think it's broken.
Like, first of all, I think QAnon in general is, like, probably a federal operation to trick people.
Do you?
I think so. I don't think that's real. I don't know. Like, I don't think it's really done by people who believe it. I think that it's, I think they're trying to trick people. But, not that there aren't things in...
Doesn't seem to be up and running.
Not that there are beliefs in the QAnon package that I think are related to things that are true, but I don't think that as a whole the QAnon thing was designed by people who really believe in it. But that being said, I almost wonder if we're gonna see more like stuff like this, like crazy stuff sent through the mail in order to create outrage that people are allowed to send stuff like this through the mail. I mean, the mail is already very closely monitored. I don't know if you realize that, but did you know that every piece of mail is photographed?
Yeah, they've got this their own like CIA in there.
Yeah, so there's a record, and they do turn it over to law enforcement if it's requested. Like, they can find out if you mailed something. It's not private. Every piece of mail is photographed and recorded.
Was it Friday that I did 2 hours in the mail on TIC? No, Friday was a short day. Thursday on the U.S. mail and how it makes money and how the whole racket.
Yeah,
it's
so
interesting.
So I almost wonder if there's going to be a push to like crack down on disinformation sent through the mail, and if like this postcard is like part of the impetus for doing that.
Look, I mean, political mailers are always disinformation, misinformation.
Yeah, and actually that was a big deal in Massachusetts because they tried to make it illegal to lie in political mailers, that's a really tough thing. Lying is not illegal speech, by the way. It doesn't violate free speech to lie. You're free to lie, and you're free to lie.
Most stuff said is lies.
You're especially free to lie in elections, and that's because people are expected to have some degree of due diligence, and in politics especially, the definite like what you're calling a lie that's like tough, right? You can say that, somebody, like the way that people describe things is very different. Somebody views an anti-abortion bill as, being like that's an anti-women's rights bill, and you say somebody else voted against women's rights. Well, that person certainly didn't see it that way. In one sense, that's a lie. They would say that that's a lie, that they voted against women's rights because they just voted against abortion, and they don't see that as a women's rights issue. That's the type of thing, like, where why would you try and get the government into litigating whether something in politics is a lie or not, right? Like,
yeah, you can't. Politics is the art of lying.
So yes, they did try and do a whole thing. There was somebody, I think it was in Melrose, who her husband ran for state rep, and she got like sued because they said a political mailer that she was like involved in making was and it went dragged out for years, this court case about it, because like they said she said a lie in a political mailer, and it was like a whole thing. But yeah, you're allowed to lie in political mailers, and yes, there are like libel and slander laws, but generally those don't apply to public figures unless they're very, very extreme cases. It's very difficult for a public figure to win a libel or a slander lawsuit. But
hey, Abuela, you got anything else, or are you good?
Am I good? Well, we've got to do our Patreon show, too.
No, I understand that, but do you have anything else for the pre-Patreon?
We can wrap up for now. If you want to join us over on Patreon, we have options starting at $5 a month. That's patreon.com/burnbarrel. We do a little bit of an extra show each week over there on Sundays, and we have like some live streaming and stuff, too. And
there's what? I want to, because everybody's... I'm going to save some stuff for Patreon. I have some stuff, but some stuff I actually want to play this here, too.
Okay.
This is Sam J. You know who Sam J is?
No.
She's a comedian. Works a little blue sometimes. But anyway, the Glenn Lowry show. Glenn Lowry, who's the great Brown University economics teacher. He's a black guy, conservative, controversial sometimes. He was down in at the Comedy Store in New York, and he had a bunch of comedians come on stage to talk about cancel culture and this and that. Did you just text me something?
No.
Okay. Cancel culture and this and that. Oh, wow. CNN, from birtherism to the big lie, Barack Obama is taking up the battle against disinformation.
Oh, God.
Oh, good. That's great. Speaking to somebody. Not a smidge of corruption, according to Barack Obama, who was happy to tell you could keep your doctor if you wanted your doctor. But that's not a big lie. It's just your health insurance. Anyway, Sam J., this lady gets up, and they ask her if she's ever afraid to be canceled by cancel culture, like saying something wrong, even though she's a black woman and a lesbian, which makes her credit score in the intersectional chart high. She could. You say the wrong thing about trans people, whatever, So they ask her about the cancel mob. And the answer she gives here, and this is a woman who I think is probably politically nowhere near we are, this answer is effing awesome, though bleeped out a lot.
In groups, people are f***ing idiots.
Yeah.
And if you bend to the will of the mob, then you're always bending. And the other responsibility of artists is to say F the mob. And sometimes when you say F the mob persecutes you. They burn you at the stake. They take away your shit. They try to deny you the right to do the thing you love to do. Because the mob also usually is a group of people who hasn't tapped into their own potential yet. And hasn't tapped into their own truth. And hasn't tapped into their own access to happiness.
Break it down.
So they don't know how to process seeing a free motherfucker.
Wow.
Isn't that awesome?
Because they're not free yet.
Because they're not free yet. I thought that is fantastic and profound.
Yeah.
And what a great point. It didn't always sound like a revival, the whole thing. That was the only time during the whole night when people were like, oh my God, because she knocked people over with how profound that was.
Yeah.
It was just said perfectly. We got more of Sam J and the Patreon coming up.
Okay, so we'll head over to Patreon. Thank you everybody so much for listening. You can always find our 5 shows a week for free at burnbarrelpodcast.com. There's links to all the different places to listen. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble Video, especially we are when we get banned from YouTube, which happens sometimes. We also are at Twitter. We're at burnbarrelpod. We're at facebook.com/burnbarrelpodcast. And you can shoot us an email at burnbarrelpodcast.com.
C'est la vie.